Hello and welcome to the Movie Moolah podcast in a very special spooky season episode. Joining me today is Patrick Rae. Patrick is a very accomplished horror movie director who has worked on many a film, including one that I executive produced and distributed called I Am Lisa. Patrick, why don't you say a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am a filmmaker based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And like you said, you were very much involved with the release of I Am Lisa. And then before that, I had a film it was originally called Enclosure, which I can talk about this at some point, but it was called Arbor Demon when it was released. And then I did a film called NailBiter. I most recently just had a film called They Wait in the Dark, released through 1091 Pictures. That's on streaming. And so I'm just based here in Kansas City and then continue to make films here.
Well, that's great. I mean, I recently did some stuff on the some regional filmmaking communities and just how vital it is for the next phase of our industry. And I applaud you for continuing to grow your career in a non-typical spot for filmmaking. Actually, on that, let's start there. I was talking to Eric, who was the writer-producer of I Am Lisa, and there's a different episode there. And he mentioned that you actually do at least occasional speaking for local college campuses and all of that. I mean, I think we all do once we hit a certain level. And he said that you specifically told filmmakers not to go to LA. Is that?
Well, I mean, that's to some extent. Like, okay, so I went to the University of Kansas. I actually grew up in Nebraska, and then I moved to Lawrence, Kansas to study film. I have since been able to come back and talk to the students. I speak to the students at UMKC, which is also a school here in Kansas City. And generally, I'm always telling people right now with the technology the way it is, you don't necessarily have to move to Los Angeles to make a film. And so I'm always telling people, look, you've got the same equipment here. All you need is a good story and a group of people that you enjoy working with and continue to grow your talents here rather than like having to move to Los Angeles. And so I think things kind of changed with the digital revolution. And so that's why I'm always telling people, look, you have access to the tools, just so go make it. You don't really have an excuse now to not make a movie. So I always tell people, just go make it happen. Start obviously with short films and build your either your brand or the group of filmmakers you're working with and grow together. And I think that's what it takes to kind of grow the local film scene at whatever city you're in. So
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the only exception to that is if you start making films that are in the upper half of the 7 million or the seven figure range, then you kind of have to have some hub involvement just because you're not going to find that level of money elsewhere. And even just anytime you're in the 7-figure range, it gets hard. I've only done a few there. And so I think that, but if you're just starting your career and you really want to have more of a resume behind you before you move to those hubs, making your first couple features in a secondary or tertiary market, by which I mean anywhere beyond New York, LA, or Georgia, it can be a really big competitive advantage for you. So
absolutely. And I think a lot of people right out of college, want to stick around, and Kansas City's got a really good commercial market. So they're just a lot of talented people, and we've got lots of gear. So it's one of those things where if you want to get your, start making a low budget feature here, it's much easier to get started here than it would be if you were to move to the coast at this point. So
entirely. I mean, you have your first feature, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but your first feature, especially as a director, you generally have to finance yourself unless you get really lucky, and that's going to mean calling in every favor you've got.
Right.
if you move to one of the coastal cities, you're going to need to get all those favors again.
Yeah.
And that is not always a wise position to be in.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when you're out here, and also it's one of those things where I mean, it's just nice because people can go sleep in their own beds. We don't, you know, and everybody can just, you know, it's a community based thing. And there's a lot of locations here in Kansas City, for instance, that are happy to help at this point, you know, and if you go in there and you say, hey, I'd like to make a film, 90% of the time they'll agree to it and be happy to help. And so I think that definitely helps as well. And, you know, I mean, we have weather issues out here, which is always the case. You're going to have an issue wherever you go. I mean, when we shot They Wait in the Dark last 2 summers ago, so it would have been June of 2021. I mean, it was in the over 100 degrees in some of those days that we were filming. And so that's the kind of thing that you just have to, you know, deal with. And there were some days on I Am Lisa where the local weatherman was like, if you don't have to go outside, don't go outside. But we're in a situation where we're making a low budget feature in 14 days, and moving one day over was going to make the schedule just derail. And in some ways could have prevented the movie from being completed. So we really had to just go out and make it happen. And because we had such a tight knit group of filmmakers who enjoy working with each other, we made it work, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, I grew up in Colorado, in a small town called Steamboat Springs, and I went to film school in Denver. One of my first, I think it was like the first semester final, we went to one of my friends' parents' house in Estes, and we had a similar situation. The weather wasn't as bad, but basically because we were in this 3-block radius in Estes, we were able to get away with a lot of shit in filming stuff. Damn it, I did not make even close to 20 minutes this time. Oh well. Sorry, you're not supposed to swear for the first 20 minutes on YouTube.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah.
Beep it. You can beep it.
I am not, I don't have that sound library set up. If I told you how I edited these, you would laugh at me and I would deserve it. But I am, oh well, happens. So, I mean, yeah, you kind of just got to work with what you got, and you've got to be able to account for the unexpected. Like, yeah. So, shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
How did you decide to just start making horror movies?
Well, okay. I mean, you got to go all the way back to my childhood. It was one of those things where I wasn't supposed to be watching horror movies. I was a kid in the 80s, and my parents were, my parents were very lenient on what I watched. They really were. But I mean, they were like, okay, you can't watch Freddy, you can't watch Jason, but then I would watch them anyway because I had my own TV and I had cable. So it because of that, I had this interest in the genre. I had a subscription to Fangoria magazine and all that stuff. So so I always knew that was the kind of genre I wanted to do. I know that sometimes people think, well, horror lends itself to low budget filmmaking, which is true, which is very true. And they're like, is that why you do it? I go, no, I just love horror movies, and I watch every horror movie that gets released. And so that's kind of why. And it was one of those things where I had some low budget horror ideas that I thought were kind of contained, and so we just went out and made it happen. And I haven't stopped, and I feel like it's good because I mean that's one of the things that it's a fear with filmmakers. I think is if you make one feature and then you're done. I think it's harder to get the next couple done, and so you just have to keep going and really just never look back. And so that's kind of the way it's worked out. I shot NailBiter was mostly shot in Lawrence, Kansas, when I was actually working for a TV studio at the time. And they were one of the investors in the project as well. And we actually shot a majority of that movie in a warehouse that was originally used to build organs, musical organs. And that particular building was used for the movie Carnival of Souls, which is a very, very famous 1960s horror film, black and white. And so, because that was also shot in Lawrence, Kansas, it was just a very interesting thing. So, So we shot that movie, and it was one of those things where, of course, like halfway through production, we ran out of money, and we had gotten about 2/3 of the movie shot, and we ran out of money, and we had to take an entire year off to raise more money. And so there was this fear that we were never going to finish the film. I was worried the actors were going to change their look and, and look completely different when we brought them back. But luckily, we persevered, got through it, and finished the film. And then it was released. It's funny because the first feature, I always tell people, takes like more than a couple years if you're lucky. And that one took about 4 years to complete, and it got released in 2013. It was actually in the Redbox kiosks in 2013.
Nice.
And so and then it aired for a while on Chiller, which was a channel that NBC Universal owned, that closed. I think it stopped airing in 2018. But around that time I started working on another project, and do you mind if I just keep going with my
I mean, like I will stop you if you get too far off, but
okay,
I haven't found.
I'm gonna go through, yeah, okay. So so I started writing a film with my co-writer Michelle Davidson. We worked on several projects together, and we wrote a film called Enclosure, which was, again, a very contained horror movie because it's inside, most of it's inside of a tent, hence the title Enclosure. And we wrote the film to take place in the Ozarks, which is about 3 hours from here. And it ended up being financed in Charleston, South Carolina. So we ended up filming the movie in Charleston, South Carolina in December of 2014, which is funny because December in Charleston is pretty warm. So you forget that it was like a couple weeks before Christmas, but it felt like it was in the 70s the whole time. But we shot the whole movie in 12 days. It starred Fiona Dourif and Jake Busey and an actor named Kevin Ryan, who's been doing a lot of television lately. He's become very successful. And
wait, was it Jake that was in Starship Troopers, or was that
he was in Starship Troopers? He's been in a lot of stuff lately. He was on Stranger Things, I think season 3. And it was good. And so we ended up the film got released. It premiered at Fright Fest in London, which was my first film getting into Fright Fest, so I was very excited.
It's a good fest.
Yeah, and it was under the name Enclosure at the time. But then when the distributor picked it up, this was around the time where everything was alpha stacking. They wanted it to be, of
course. Yeah.
So they changed the title to an A title, which was Arbor Demon, which I thought was for what I would consider a slow burn art house horror movie. That was kind of a on the nose title. But
that's called a distributor retitle.
Right. And that was my first experience with that. I was not pleased, and I have since gotten over it. But it was very, very, at the time, I was not happy with it.
Did it have anything to do with trees?
Yes.
Okay. Well, at least there's that. And I have seen, I think my favorite was Midley, a movie I represented, where a distributor retitled it from Paralytic to Narco Hitman.
Okay.
Which, the film was about a hitman for the cartel, and basically his last job. So that did make some degree of sense.
Yeah.
What didn't was that it was a slow burn psychological thriller similar to Memento.
Yeah.
And the box art had the lead actor's face photoshopped onto somebody else and tons of buildings exploding behind him.
Yeah.
So that was...
Yeah, that happens. I mean, when NailBiter was released in Japan, they released it with this massive, because the movie, the story elements, there's a tornado, and the mom and daughters run into a cellar, tree falls on the cellar door, and then from there it becomes a creature movie. But the tornado, and I've been trying to make a sequel to this movie for like a decade. I really have, and I always wanted to do it. So the poster the Japanese release had was a giant tornado with like gremlins jumping out of it, and then like 3 or 4 actors that were not in the movie running from an exploding house, and it was just like, but you know what, I have to say it was actually pretty cool. But yeah, so back to Arbor Demon, they released it in 2017, and it's on MGM Plus now. It was on Paramount Plus up till about a month ago, and I think then they got rid of a lot of their film stuff. But so the film is done well, and then after that, I ended up taking a complete detour. I was approached by a writer producer here in Kansas City who was making a family film, and she was originally going to direct the film, and then I ended up taking over because she had some life issues that she needed to deal with, so she asked me to direct, and so I did. Great experience. We shot the movie here in Kansas City over I think it was 16 days. It was my longest schedule. I was like, what am I going to do with all this time? But they always tell you, don't work with dogs and children. And I did both with this movie. And
that's dangerous. Very dangerous.
It was actually pleasant. So I feel like if I do it again, I'm testing fate. But it was a pleasant experience for the most part. And that movie was called Belong to Us. It got released in 2019. It's on Peacock right now, and it's on a number of other streaming services. I think it's on Redbox On Demand and stuff. It was on Up TV's streaming service for a while as well. And then
they still around?
Up TV, I think, still is around. So their streaming service is called Up TV Faith and Family, and so it was.
Okay.
It's on there for about 2 years, and then, but it was funny because I met Eric Winkler on that movie because I cast his son in the film, and so he was on set several days, and he kept telling me about this werewolf film that he was writing, this werewolf revenge film. And so, flash forward to 2019, and we're shooting it. So we filmed that movie in Kansas City, hot summer. And that was a 14-day shoot. But that
was only 14 days.
It was only 14 days. And the thing is that, like, for the main principal photography, obviously we had some pickups and stuff like that, but it was 14 days. And the crazy thing was, the good thing was a lot of the locations were 10, 15 minutes from my house. So it was one of those first time experiences where I'm like, oh yeah, no, I just have to go up the street. It was nice. It was nice. So we filmed that, and we're able to I do all my own editing. So I was able to do post really through the first part of the pandemic, the start of the pandemic. We were finishing out post-production in May, and then we had the movie finished for the summer of 2020, and that movie also premiered at Fright Fest, which that year it was a completely
that was a very different market.
Virtual,
and that festival. Did we get it? Did Mutiny Pictures get it right before or right after Fright Fest? I know we were talking.
It was right before. It was right before.
Yeah. So
I remember. Yeah, because I think it was. Yeah, because I remember emailing you guys to tell you that it got into Fright Fest. And but yeah, it was one of those things where because it was the pandemic, the premiere was virtual, and it was one of those things where it was locked to just the UK, so nobody in the US could see the online
unless you had a VPN. I mean, sorry, wait, yes, nobody in the US
exactly.
Movie.
So but yeah, so then the movie got released in the Redbox in 2021, and the film has continued to do well. It's on Screenbox right now. We're hoping and praying that we can get a sequel going with that film. We have a script that I'm really, really excited about, and
I'm not. Since I sold Mutiny, I'm not involved with Lisa One anymore, but I still talk to some of the same international buyers when I'm at markets.
Yeah.
And they still ask about it, at least every once in a while. So I say you have to talk to the right people, and that's all I say.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah, it's but look, that movie was a sleeper. Yeah. We thought it was going to do well. That's why we took it, but it was still one of our, I want to say like our first 5 acquisitions.
Yeah.
And might have been first 10, but not more than that. And it kind of blew our expectations out of the water, which was great. And also is kind of an example of why, at least to a level, as a filmmaker, you need to advocate for your own work, and you need to be able to take low expectations in stride, because basically nobody knows what it's actually going to do.
Nobody knows. And I think it had a good, when he pitched me the story idea, I was like, oh, that hasn't been done before. And that's a good thing about doing That's about the good thing about watching a lot of horror movies. I watch just about everything. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of always thinking to myself, okay, what hasn't been done before, so you're not repeating somebody else's work, and there's been female werewolf movies before, but never one that was like a revenge movie. And so I was kind of like, I was excited about the premise.
Yeah.
But so that film continues to do well, and I'm very pleased with that. And then I was approached in November of 2020, my friend Megan Flynn, who is a producer here in Kansas City and also an actress. She's actually in Up in the Air.
Oh, wow.
She's done a lot of stuff. She just recently was on Tulsa King. She had a small role on Tulsa King, but she's based here in Kansas City. And she reached out to me and she's like, I want to make a feature. And I'm like, awesome. She gave me the parameters of what the budget would be. And I'm like, well, that would be a good haunted house budget. So basically I wrote this script called They Wait in the Dark, and it's more or less, it's an LGBTQ haunted house.
That's LGBTQ horror is a very solid bet if you can do it authentically, and only if you can do it authentically.
Well, I mean, I wrote it for my lead, Sarah McGuire, who is part of the LGBTQ community, and she's a fantastic actress. I have enjoyed working with her. I'm shooting another film with her right now as we speak. She was in several of my short films. She's in I Am Lisa. She gets her face melted off in a fryer.
I was wondering if it was her.
Yeah, no, it's definitely her. And so, it's one of those things where I wrote the script for her in mind. So that was never a question. I always had the lead in mind. But what I wanted to figure out was, for me, the biggest problem with haunted house movies is I'm always kind of like, why do they stay? The second I see a chair move or something fly off the wall, I'd be like, all right, we're going to get
we're out.
We're out.
Yeah.
And it makes sense in like Poltergeist, because the girl is missing. Carol Ann's missing. The only way they can communicate with her is through the TV. So obviously they're not going to want to leave. So I was like, okay, I have to figure out a reason why she's hiding in this house. Well, so I wrote it where she's on the run with her adopted son, Adrian, and she doesn't have a car. She's hitchhiking, and she gets back to her childhood home, which is in the middle of nowhere in Kansas on a farm. And she's hiding from her ex-girlfriend. So that was my idea. So it's kind of got the threat of the ex-girlfriend, and it has the threat of something supernatural that's happening inside the house. And by the time she figures out what's happening, it's too late because the girlfriend's found her. So she's boxed in this situation.
So there's basically that threat from outside the house as well as from that's
so like I said, by the time she figures out, okay, this house is haunted, she can't exactly just leave because the girlfriend is closing in on her and tracking her down. So it was that was my challenge. So I wrote the script in November of 2020, and we ended up filming the film in June of 2021, and it was a 12-day shoot with 1 day of like aerials and inserts and stuff like that. So it was very quick, but I wrote it so that we could do it in that period of time, we shot a couple locations in Kansas City, one in Leavenworth, Kansas, where the prison is. We shot at the gas station there, and then we shot the house stuff in Topeka, which is about an hour and 15 from Kansas City, which was a challenge in the sense, okay, we found the perfect location. It's this abandoned farmhouse that's going to be renovated. In fact, they were renovating it while we were filming. So like they would tell us, they're like, hey, the kitchen's going to look completely different tomorrow. And we're like, oh shit, we better get all of the shots done by that point. Right. So, but anyway, so then, the challenge is you have a choice. You can either rent a house and make it look like the way you want it, or you can, but then you can also find somebody who's living in a house that looks like the way you want it, but then you have to pay for their hotel room while you're filming. So we were lucky. We found a house that basically was abandoned and had all this stuff inside of it still. And it was great. I mean, we had to go in there and kind of make it nicer because it was like a health.
Oh yeah. I have a side business in real estate investment and property management here in Philadelphia, which means I've been in a lot of long abandoned houses, and those places can get really scary really fast.
Yeah. No, it was, and we were, June 2021 was kind of that weird gap between people being vaccinated and Omicron. So it was like we had this nice little window of opportunity to make a movie, and then it was like July, Omicron took off, and everybody was getting sick again and stuff. So, you know, we were able to get it done in that time period, and so then we premiered the film once again at Fright Fest. I make it my life goal to premiere all my features there if the time.
I mean, it's a
right.
good place to do it.
Yeah,
really.
it gets you a lot of attention, and it's just a really great festival. The only bad thing about this last time I was there is I caught COVID while I was in London, but that's that's not my own fault. That's my own fault. But so we premiered it there, and then the movie got released in February. We got a nice review in the New York Times, and
did you get the LA Times as well, or just the New York?
Just the New York Times.
Okay. Were they nice to you?
Yes, they gave it a positive review. So
that's great. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we were like, that was one of the things where like my producer that morning, she texted me, she's like, we're in the New York Times, and I'm like, oh God, please tell me it's a good review. And it was very positive. And so we're at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, at least with the critics.
That's not so bad. That's quite good. So are you certified yet? Do you have enough for the
no, we have 15 reviews up there, but that's
close. It's 20, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it was good. And so you know, we're continuing to screen, and I just had I've had 3 screenings of the movie in the last couple days. I had one in Topeka on Saturday.
This is the 1091 that we were talking about in the pre-roll.
Yes,
right?
Correct. 1091 Pictures distributes the film in the US. And so and I've been it's got a couple screenings here in Kansas City. Probably the last time it's going to be playing on the big screen before it's strictly, you know, streaming. And I think they told us that we're going to be hopefully in a couple different places streaming wise in October for Halloween. Right now it's on Apple TV and Vudu and iTunes, and
you always start it with the TVOD. That's
the
just
TVOD, and then,
yeah.
I'm praying that it ends up at some cool places, and so but I'm very proud of the movie. But it was one of those movies where I'm like, if this doesn't work, it's almost 100% my fault because you know, I wrote the script, I edited the film, directed the film, so I felt like a lot of pressure to not mess it up. So
it sounds like a really solid.
I'm very proud of it, and the performances are really good in it. And you know, we made it for like a teeny tiny budget, you know.
Yeah.
And we did it with a small crew, and we were lucky in the sense that when we wouldn't have been able to make the movie in 12 days if we hadn't had that location, because we were able to leave all the lights set up for the next day, so it was a walkaway set, you know. That really saved us. So
no, so I've wanted to start a podcast for like a bit over a year, at very least, since I sold Mutiny. Right. Big reason it took me so long to start it is I was absolutely adamant that I needed to have a room in my house that is a walkaway set with a green screen and lights, because I knew I would never use it if it wasn't that. And that's a very, very, very small scale of what you're talking about, but it's
vital.
Yeah.
Entirely. Otherwise you feel like you have to set it up each time, and then you get less motivated to actually do it. If it's already set, you just have to sit down and make it happen, you know?
Yep.
But yeah, no, it was nice in the sense that basically we knew the house was getting renovated, so we're like, do you mind if we put some nails in the wall? Nope. Okay, cool. You know, because you never know if you're working on somebody else's house. I know. Funny story on I Am Lisa. It was like the first or second day of production. We were filming in somebody's house, and you know, it was a situation where we didn't know there were cats in the basement, and so somebody opened the door, and one of the cats got out. You know, and those kind of things happen, and you're just like, well, we didn't know that the cat was in there, you know. But then this is a story I tell a lot. The house was completely surrounded by police. And I don't know if Eric ever told you this story, but it was funny because we're filming a kitchen scene for I Am Lisa, and I'm like directing, and then I'm like, why are there cops in the windows walking back and forth? And I'm thinking, well, what did we do? I'm like, did we park the grip truck in the wrong place? What's going on? So we stopped, and when I see all the cops in the backyard around this bag in this backyard where we're filming, and it turns out that somebody down the street had robbed a house, and they were on the run, and they jumped the fence where we were filming, and they dropped a duffel bag of Cuban cigars that they had stolen from the neighboring house.
How many Cuban cigars did that guy have?
I mean, they said it was $50,000 worth of Cuban cigars. So
I can see why he got robbed.
Yeah, and so the guy ran in the backyard, dropped the bag, and then kept running. So then all the cops swarmed the house that we're filming in. So it was one of the weirdest things. I'm like, well, of course that's what happens, you know? And then we end up filming at a place where we needed a security guard because it was a defunct police station. And then nothing happened that time. Nothing happens then, you know? It's like we're filming in this nice person's house, and it's like, oh, that's when we get swarmed by police. So that was a fun story, and it was, everybody found it comical, and it didn't set us back that much time. You know, sometimes you worry, you're like, all right, well, I guess we're gonna have
my day shot losing light.
Yeah. So it worked out, but it was pretty funny.
That's okay. Eric never told me that story, and I'm gonna
maybe
have
he's
to
blocked it from his memory. But yeah, that was just like the second day of filming. It was really wild, and
that's really entertaining. So there was one time when I was in film school, and I wasn't involved in this production. It was like my first year, and these people were like third or fourth year. Where in Denver they were shooting in a warehouse, and it was like a heist scene. I don't remember. I wasn't involved, but the UPM just like right before, and they had prop guns on set because you know sometimes you do, and the UPM saw it. And it's like, hey, did we ever let the cops know that we've got prop guns? And then the director said, no, let's do that. So they delay 10 minutes, let them know. The cop says, okay, let me put you on hold while we run this. And then the person comes back and says, it's really, really, really good you let us know, because in the warehouse right next to you is SWAT team training. And they are going to they would have come in guns blazing. It wouldn't have mattered.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real fear. And, you know, we've been filming, well, I mean, with They Wait in the Dark, I have a scene where I have several guns in that movie. And we have a scene where there's an 8-year-old in the film, and the mother is teaching him how to fire a rifle. And we filmed this obviously several months before Rust happened. So thinking back to it, because we were very nervous that day because the kid, it was blanks, obviously, but like still, it's very stressful. And it was 100 degrees in the shade, and all of us were getting frustrated because, you know, your brain goes to mush when it's that hot. But I think that had we shot the movie after Rust, I would have rewritten the script so that there wouldn't have been any guns in the film. I'm just too paranoid, and yeah, it just seems to me now like the film I'm shooting right now. I'm actually shooting a found footage horror movie right now. I decided this summer that we were just I've had one idea for a found footage movie, and I decided to pull the trigger on it. No pun intended. I didn't even mean to make that a pun. But anyway, so we decided to do it because, I mean, it's a non-union project, and it's between, the strike is happening right now, and I was just like, now is a good time to go out and make something. Yeah. So we've been filming it found footage style because I've always seen it that way as this kind of movie. But I eliminated all guns from the script.
I mean, I understand why there are certain stories that necessitate guns and things, and also they are exciting. There's a reason that the 3 basic sorts of movies that you could make that are almost assured a profit are Girls and Guns, Babes and Blood, and Kids and Dogs. Weirdly, not separate on that one.
At Christmas.
Yes,
but we can get all of those,
especially at Christmas. Yes. But oh god, don't mix all 3 of those. There's the FBI is getting involved if you do. But so anyway, that is I forget where we were, but I think
I
that's
was talking about
yeah.
my found footage movie, which is
Yes.
it's a vampire found footage movie. So
Okay.
a lesbian vampire found footage movie, obviously, because I wrote it for Sarah, and it starts off. It's funny because it starts off kind of comedic and then becomes more of a horror movie. But we've been filming it. It's funny because we've been filming it in an area of Kansas City called the West Bottoms, which is not a place that you necessarily want to be at night, but they've made it much nicer. But had we gone down there with replica guns or fake guns, it would have been terrible decision.
That would be, yeah, that's almost, I
So,
mean, so is it more like What We Do in the Shadows, or is it more like, I guess, Nosferatu or
I would say that where the comedy, it's a little bit more like, it's hard to explain because it starts off, she's filming her dates for her dating blog, and through some happenstance, she ends up on a date with a girl who actually is a vampire. And but then they find themselves being chased by the vampire hunters. And so the vampire hunters are more or less the villains of the movie. But and so it's all through her camera and her brother's camera, because her brother's the one who films her dates. So but then there's a camera guy with the vampire hunters filming the hunt. So there's these different perspectives found footage wise that I'm. But I mean, the movie is going to be very tight. It's going to be a very, I wouldn't say like, it's not going to be one of my problems with a lot of found footage movies, which I've seen a lot. That's one of my favorite subgenres of horror. A lot of them are too long. Like a lot of them are way too long.
There are a lot of issues with found footage to begin with.
Yeah.
I've had, I don't even know how many submitted to me. I've only ever signed 2.
Okay.
One was another lesbian found footage movie called By Day's End, and there are stories I could tell about that, but now I've named it, I probably shouldn't. The other one would be Skinamarink, which was one of the last things I signed to Mutiny.
Yep.
And I feel like By Day's End, it was not a Mutiny Pictures release. It was something I represented and did the best I could with it, but the company that ended up getting it, we had creative differences with. I will leave it there.
Well, this I think is going to be just under 80 minutes. I mean, it moves.
Oh, that's better.
It moves fast. It does, because once it hits the 30-minute mark, it just zooms, and that's the thing, is that it needs to. The performances I'm really happy with, because Sarah's so good, and I cast this actress named Valerie Bates. She's fantastic, and then I might make a cameo in it. My wife is in it. It's like it's become a family affair. Let me tell you. And the thing is, I think
are you one of the vampire hunters?
No, my wife is like the main vampire hunter.
Really? I would have expected her to be one of the dates as a cameo.
No.
Okay.
And she's sort of unrecognizable in it. And so we have one more day of shooting, and I've been editing as we go. So I'm excited. I'm hoping it will be, the sound post is going to take a long time, because
that gets brutal.
It's mainly because where the found footage movies really succeed is in the sound design. And if you look at Paranormal Activity, it's one of those things where visually it's horrible. I mean, it just is, like, it doesn't look good, but sound wise, it's like it transports you. And I think that's why it's important to really sell the sound. I mean, that's with every movie. I think sound is more important.
Always. It's
more important than visual.
It's an invisible art. Again, I know this is, to anybody watching this, you probably already know that, but basically, audience will notice if your sound is off.
Yeah.
A lot faster than they'll notice if your shots are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why when I went in last night for my screening at for They Wait in the Dark, I was like, how does it sound? It looks pretty, but how does it sound? Is it synced? You just never know. But yeah, so the sound post on my found footage horror movie will be extensive, because we're writing songs for it and all that stuff. So it's going to be a little while, but it'll be sometime next year when it's out, and hopefully, and I'll try to get a festival premiere and such.
Yeah, I would definitely like to know more about that as it comes out. But let's move on to talking a little bit about distribution, because
Sure.
you've talked about really some great placement for even your early movies. And that's not a success that all filmmakers share.
Right.
So I'd be curious to know how you found these distribution deals, or if they found you, and how, without naming names, in general, how do you feel about the distribution you've received?
So with some of my films, it's interesting because with Arbor Demon, I wasn't a
Mhm,
producer. I
mhm.
was the director, I was the co-writer. So they were the ones who found the distribution deal for that. And it has been in a lot of places. I think it was on Hulu within the first 3 or 4 months that it came out.
It's not that's not terrible.
Yeah,
Well,
and that was
yeah,
2017. And then it made its way to it's on Fubo TV. I don't know if you know what Fubo TV.
I do, yeah, that it's an AVOD, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it was on Paramount Plus for like 2 years, and now it's on MGM Plus. It's weird because it's like it
I'm
just changes
confused.
all the time. Well, Epix was originally that's what it originally was, and then it
Mhm,
rebranded to MGM Plus. So I've been pleased with where that movie has ended up.
mhm.
Despite the fact that it's now called Arbor Demon versus Enclosure. And they may have been, I will eat my words. Would it have done as well with the title Enclosure? I would have felt better from an artistic standpoint, but maybe the movie did better because of the title. I don't know. But yeah, and it had a decent international release. Ironically, it's called Enclosure in the UK. They released it under its original title.
That's
Um,
actually pretty common.
yeah,
More common
yeah,
than you'd think, but
yeah.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, and then Belong to Us, again, it was a situation where I wasn't necessarily involved with the distribution as much. I gave my 2 cents in the process, but and we went through, and I'm blanking on the name of the company. Um that has not been as well of a good of a experience, to be perfectly transparent with you. Uh
Mhm.
we hit the movie came out in August of 2019. It was in Walmart. And once we hit the pandemic, it was like radio silence, even though the movie was showing up on various, streaming services. So I am not in a position where I can do anything legally. It's more of a position where the producer has to do something. So full disclosure on that one.
That's yeah, I mean, that's really unfortunate. It happened a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
no quarterly
yeah.
reports. I think we received one in the first. And this is if I remember, it's a pretty decent sized company that continues to pick up movies. And
Oh, so it's not just like they folded, it's just that they
no,
stopped.
I thought they were,
Yeah.
but then I saw they were actually producing a movie on top of it. So it's not. Um, so that
Oh,
is
I have a guess,
that.
but I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah, I'm not. It's one of those things where I'm gonna remain fairly quiet. But yeah, it has. I mean, perfectly honest with you, it has not been great. The movie has
Mm,
gotten a lot of eyes on it. Like I said, it's on Peacock and all these different places.
mhm.
It's streaming now. Every other day, it's playing on like Redbox's Faith and Family channel on
Oh,
Roku.
right, yeah.
So it's always on. And then there's a point. I'll be honest with you. There's a point as a filmmaker where um, if I'm not a producer on the movie, my work is mostly done at that point.
Mhm.
And so I will market the film on my social media. But if it comes to situations with a distributor, like I
It's not
can't.
your job.
Right. Now, if I'm a
Yeah.
producer on it, different story altogether.
Mhm.
And NailBiter was interesting because it went through Grindstone, which is a subsidiary of Lionsgate,
Yeah.
and they pushed it really hard for the first. I mean, like I said, it was on Chiller.
Yeah.
It did really well, and then after Chiller folded, it's been very quiet. So I keep waiting for some type of resurgence of some type, but it hasn't really. It's been very quiet, and I get asked a lot. even this last weekend when I was at a particular film festival, somebody goes, "Hey, when are you going to make NailBiter 2?" Because I teased it at the end of the first movie, and then it just it was never, we were never able to get it off the ground. It's sequels for indie films. I never want to do them just to do them. You know, I think that there's sometimes a feeling like we're just going to throw something together and put a two behind it and make some money. And I'm like, I have to make it better than the last one. I have to, you know,
you have to do the El Mariachi,
the Desperado. Absolutely. Absolutely. Or I always say, and I think Eric is tired of me mentioning it. He always says Alien and Aliens. I'm always like Mad Max and Road Warrior, you know, like for me, like that's such a huge, between those two, there's such a huge leap to me. But you know, so yeah, I mean, for me, that experience was positive for NailBiter until we hit 2018, and then it's been very quiet because it was on the horror channel in the UK. And now that's a different, they rebranded. I can't remember the name of that channel in the UK now, but it's not the horror channel. It's got like a one-word name.
Yeah, I should know.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was getting a lot of play, and I had a lot of people. In fact, I like when I premiered Enclosure at Fright Fest, somebody came to me with the UK DVD of NailBiter and had me sign it. And it was with I'm trying to remember the name of the company that it was with at the time in the UK that went into administration, and then the movie just kind of disappeared. 101 Films was supposed to get the rights to NailBiter, but then they never did anything with it.
That's, I mean, look, I know a lot of the people at 101, and in general, all of my experiences have been positive with them. That is possible that
it got lost. You know, because I even met with the guy. Funny enough, when we ran into each other at Fright Fest, and he goes, "I'm getting your movie," because the company that was falling into administration at the time, all of their movies were going over to 101 Films, but then they never put it out. I don't know what happened. It was very disappointing.
That is unfortunate.
You know, it
does. Unfortunately, it happens a lot. There's a lot of weird behind the scenes restructuring that happens.
Right. When the movie is still up on, it's still on, you know, Apple TV, and it's still on iTunes, and it's available on Amazon. It's still available streaming wise. It's never gone to any of the free services, what you call AVOD, or you know, it's never been on any of those. And so, but I've noticed that a lot of films picked up by Lionsgate don't necessarily end up on some of the free streaming services as much. But I'll keep my eye out. But I it's been so long, and you know, it's funny because everybody's like, "Why didn't you make a sequel?" I'm like, well, I had a script. It took too long. I got frustrated, and I ended up on another movie. So it's like, you know, and it's like 4 movies down the road line, and I'm like, I haven't made this, you know, the second one. So
no, it's I
get asked about it all the time.
I mean, if you get asked about it all the time, that is something that's good, but it's not enough to make it. It's
exactly. I'm always like, hey, if you've got the money, you know, we've got, you know, it's a very the great thing about it was a very much a Kansas horror movie because it involves tornadoes and stormy weather. It's a big part of the plot. The creatures
does it involve red slippers?
No, it does not. It's like the anti-Wizard of Oz. There's creatures. And we created these fake creatures that are like werewolves, except they only change when there's bad weather. So instead of a full moon, if there's a thunderstorm, they start transforming. So that was a whole original concept that we came up with.
That's a great concept, especially
and so the first movie, they get locked in the cellar with one of them because it's during a storm, and so one of them has been chained up in the cellar because it's a storm, right? And then, you know, so And so that's what the sequel just got. It was a much more expansive version of that. Still in a small town, Kansas, but with like a town that was occupied by all these creatures and stuff like that. So there was more to it. And it, you know, I will make that movie someday if I have to self-fund it at this point. But it's, you know, I'm still happy with the concept, and I'm glad that it, you know, fingers crossed that nobody comes around and goes, you know, that's a good idea, I'm going to rip it off. But you know, you never know. You never know.
It is a very strong high concept. It is and I am a little surprised nobody else has ripped it off yet.
Yeah,
But
thankfully, and maybe
yeah.
it's because I think maybe it's that's why a lot of people really like dug the first one, and we put a lot of time and energy into that film, and it ends kind of on a cliffhanger, which would have made for a good sequel.
Mhm.
And so I'm always thinking, okay, it's been 10 years since the release of the first movie, and you know, legacy sequels are a thing now. You know, you can make
Oh
movie
yeah.
30 years later and stuff, but so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. I think with that, we're going to move on to the last three questions that I
Okay,
asked
great, great.
all of my
Yeah.
guests. So the first question, you can answer it second. Sometimes people need a second to think. What are your top three favorite movies of all time as it stands right this second now? They can change in 10 minutes,
Oh
but
yeah,
right now.
it's hard because the top three fluctuate, but I would definitely say
Mhm.
Raiders of the Lost Ark is number one.
Mhm.
I would get Empire Strikes Back in there. Funny enough, none of them are horror. I would put Big
I
Trouble.
was surprised that
I
the
would.
first two
I
were.
mean, Big Trouble in Little China's in there as well. I think you know, but
Okay.
then I think RoboCop is always kind of like bumping up
Edging it. Yeah,
against,
no, that makes total
you
sense.
know. And then I would. I mean, I would put horror movies in there. It's just that those are the ones that like Raiders was like the one that I saw as a kid that was maybe the most influential in terms of like, oh my god, I want to make movies.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies I always tell people that it's perfect because what would you change? What would you change in that movie?
I would make it so that I almost said Han Solo, but I meant Indy doesn't stay on top of the submarine when it goes under the ocean.
That is the one thing I always. It's funny because there's actually, I think, shots behind the scenes shots where he's hanging onto it or something like that they filmed, which would have been ridiculous. But you know, I always imagine that the submarine just never went underwater. He just hung out on top, and when he was close enough to the Nazi base, he just swam. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, those
Yeah,
are probably
no.
my top three. It fluctuates because like I'll be like thinking about, you know, I'll be watching RoboCop and then be like, well, this is actually more of my top three. And then it's like,
No, I understand. So like I said, it's meant to be a how you're feeling at that
at the
exact
time, yeah,
moment.
for sure.
But yeah, I actually used to use that when I was still single. I actually used to use that when I was trying to chat up women in bars, and
Ask
it
them what their
worked.
favorite three movies were.
Yeah.
Did any of them say RoboCop? I'm just,
I don't know if anybody said RoboCop. I got The Princess Bride a lot.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. No, it was a for the single people in this audience,
Yeah.
it does work. You get to know a lot about the person really
Right.
quickly.
Right.
So then the second question,
Okay.
you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice. Where would you, what would that advice be, and when would you give it to yourself?
I think probably, and I've learned this since, I would go back and say, you know, have a sense of humor about everything, because if you take things too seriously, like if filmmaking, if the fun can drain out of it if you let it. And I think that I have since learned this, but I probably would have gone back earlier when I was making NailBiter and even Enclosure, where I was a little too, maybe too serious about it to the point where like it was very stressful and not as much fun as it could have been. And since then, it's been a lot better. So I feel like I would go back and say, you know, just have some fun, because we're all on this planet for a, you know, finite amount of time, and it's like good to just enjoy yourself while you're here, you know, and don't take yourself so seriously.
Oh, that makes sense. That's part of why I crack a lot of dumb jokes on this
I
podcast.
mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is that like They Wait in the Dark is a very, very serious movie, but on off camera, we were laughing and making jokes the whole time. And it made the process much smoother. You know, I don't believe in having unhappy sets. If anyone's unhappy, I'm like, you know, we need to
Increase
have
the
a talk,
catering budget.
because, you know, I feel like everybody, I don't like, I was told one time that you need to make people uncomfortable on set. And I'm like, why? It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't care if you're making Schindler's List. You don't have to make people uncomfortable.
I'd imagine it would only hurt the final product. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
happy crews make better movies.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Solidarity.
Yeah.
But the yeah, then the final question.
Okay.
Where can people find you? What are you looking for from people who might listen? Yeah.
Okay. So you can find me on Facebook. I think it's Patrick M. Rae. M
Sounds
for
right.
Michael. I think, but you can find me there. I'm always posting stuff about where my films are playing and what I'm working on. Lately I've been on Twitter a lot more, ironically, or X. I mean, I don't, whatever you want to call it. It's funny because I'm been kind of late to the game on it, but and then Instagram. I'm on Instagram under I think Patrick M. Rae there. And Instagram is great because you can have as many friends as you want. Like Facebook caps you at 5,000, so it's like, you know. And then but then I guess you can have your Filmmaker page, which is you know, you can go as high as you want, but it doesn't. Yeah. And then I'm on TikTok now, so you know, look me up there. I'm occasionally posting trailers and stuff like that. So, but a lot of my films again are on like the typical streaming services like Vudu and Amazon, Redbox on demand. I've got I Am Lisa and Belong to Us both on Peacock. Arbor Demon on MGM Plus. NailBiter is on, like I said, Apple TV, iTunes, Amazon. So yeah, just looked up the films there. Give them a nice score on IMDb because it always seems like IMDb is a place where angry people hang out and purposely make your score go down low. So
that's that would be accurate. They're like the LA Times in that way.
Yeah.
But the kidding, the LA Times is a great outlet. I've just gotten nothing but negative reviews, so I make fun of them. Yeah,
but yeah, so those are that's where to find me, and hopefully I will continue to keep making stuff. So that's my you know, everybody's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, still making movies, and you know, I have a house and 2 kids, and you know, it's like, you know, it's a balancing act, you know, it's a balancing act of you know, trying to make a living at this and maintaining my creative juices per se, and then raising my kids and being a good family man. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've hit a point in your life where there aren't a ton of qualitative differences that could be made from where you are. You've got what sounds like a great family. You get to make movies for a living. And you've got your own. I mean, there you are.
But I wouldn't say no to a $5 million budget.
I mean, who would?
Yeah, but I always tell people, yeah, no, I'll do it if it happens. But you know, I'm not gonna. The thing is, I don't like to wait around for yeses and nos sometimes. So I'll go out and make something, you know, regardless.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's a natural part of this industry.
Right.
So Patrick, thank you very much. This has been the Movie Moolah podcast in a special spooky season episode, and I'm never doing that again. If you like this content, please hit like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the bell. If you're anywhere else, set it to auto download. And if you want more film business content, check out my free independent film business resource pack at theguerrillarep.com/resources. Lots of goodies there. Thanks very much, and see you next week.